Our studio is shaking. You can see it shaking right now. I think this is our second one in a day, and all those aftershocks. Our studio is still shaking. Wow.
The magnitude 5.6 trembler hit just before 11 p.m., November 5th.
911.
And I was just wondering about that noise we heard. Was that an earthquake we had?
It was probably an earthquake, yes.
Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office, this is Chris.
Did we just have an earthquake?
I believe so, because I felt it in Midwest City.
It's part of a sequence of quakes that also included two measuring 4.7 on the Richter scale. The scale measures waves of ground motion during a quake. That shaking comes in the form of P, or primary waves, and S, or secondary waves.
What you hear is the P wave, and it is a compression wave, and then the sensation you get when you're feeling something is the S wave coming in afterwards.
In terms of the number of earthquakes that we're having, is this a large number for a cluster of earthquakes, or is this a relatively small number?
I'd say it's about average.
The epicenter of the recent seismic activity is along a section of the Wilzetta Fault in southeastern Lincoln County, near the towns of Prague, Meeker, and Sparks. That's according to Austin Holland. He's a research seismologist with the Oklahoma Geological Survey.
It's just an amazing fault. It continues to the northeast into Creek County, and then on south into Pottawatomie County, sort of past Shawnee and on down that way. So it's a very long fault. Right now, the earthquakes are over about a 14-mile span, roughly. So, you know, there's more of the fault there.
In a normal year, Oklahoma records a couple of hundred earthquakes, but in the past 2 years, that number has shot up to more than 1,000. Holland chalks up the big increase to extra monitoring equipment, not necessarily a big uptick in seismic activity. He says for 18 months, the National Science Foundation had 50 extra monitoring stations across the state as a part of a study that has since moved on to another state. However, after the Wilzetta Fault started rumbling, the Oklahoma Geological Survey installed 34 new monitoring stations, including this one in Sparks. It's to help scientists figure out how often quakes hit Oklahoma.
California has earthquakes on decade-type scales. You know, every 10 to 20 years, some faults are having earthquakes, and 100 years on other faults. And here in Oklahoma, we don't actually know what the time frame is, because it's on the order of hundreds or probably thousands to tens of thousands of years. Things are happening very slow, and we've only had seismic instruments in the state for about 50 years.
More than 1,300 years ago, a quake of at least magnitude 7 shook the Mears Fault in southwestern Oklahoma. Its path is easy to see in this aerial photo. Holland says there's not enough data to know when or if such a powerful trembler will strike again on that fault or on the Wilzetta.
It's sort of like taking a single still out of a movie and trying to say you know what the whole movie's about from that single still.
He believes it's highly doubtful hydraulic fracking used in oil and natural gas production caused the recent outbreaks of quakes on the Wilzetta Fault.
I have done one study now where it's possible that fracking caused earthquakes. But these earthquakes occurred very shallow.
The quakes along the Wilzetta are very deep down inside the earth in what Holland calls the basement rock, not in the much shallower shale formations where fracking releases natural gas deposits.
I don't see hydrofracking as being the big player in potentially causing earthquakes. So in Oklahoma, we've had more than 100,000 wells fracked, and there have been an indication that maybe 3 of these frack jobs could have induced earthquakes.
Pam Kirkham is mayor of Sparks. She showed Holland and us damage caused by the quakes.
Our gymnasium, it's suffered some significant damage.
It's closed to the public until its structural integrity can be assessed.
It's built with the cinder blocks, and you can see from the floor all the way up to the ceiling where the, I guess it's the mortar in between, is just shaking loose. You can see daylight through the building. Down in the basement, you can see little chunks along, real low on the floor, but chunks of concrete that have come out.
Those chunks are bigger than a basketball, and some cracks are so big you can stick a finger right through them.
We're really afraid it might be a loss. You know, community this size, we really have no way to replace something like that, and it's heartbreaking.
The town's old bank, built in 1905, suffered even more damage. The 5.6 quake dislodged several large rocks from its back wall. That's the kind of damage teams from FEMA, the State Office of Emergency Management, the Red Cross, and Small Business Administration are cataloging in Lincoln and Pottawatomie counties. Lisa Armitage's house sustained heavy damage, especially to its chimney.
The rock from our fireplace was just piling in the middle of the room.
Her home sits almost on top of the epicenter of the 5.6 temblor, and like most Oklahomans, her homeowner's policy doesn't cover quake damage.
We did not have any quake insurance, and I have yet to find anyone that had any kind of coverage.
Including her neighbor, Michael Kinnaman, whose chimney also collapsed.
Each little tremor or quake we get is a little bit more damage.
His dog is happy to relax on the front porch, but Kinnaman says his family can't stay in the house until the stem wall is repaired.
It's cracked everywhere, and the house is moved over, and the porch posts are holding the house.
What assessment teams find will determine whether the governor seeks a federal disaster declaration to help local governments and individuals without earthquake insurance get federal aid for repairs.
Anything happens overseas, they send aid immediately. You know, people out here need aid.
More than 300 structures have been reported damaged. That's according to Michael Ann Newton with the Office of Emergency Management.
We're looking at not only the damage that's been done, but looking at what kind of the degree of damage that's been done and looking at how many homes and businesses that are damaged. Certainly the number of homes that we classify as destroyed, the number that have major damage, minor damage, and others that have more cosmetic damage.
And buildings aren't the only things that can be damaged. Soon after the largest quakes hit, Transportation Department and Conservation Commission crews began inspecting roads, bridges, and dams.
In a 50-mile radius from Prague, of course, we drew a line on a 50-mile radius, and it included Oklahoma City and the crosstown, which is always one of those that's a signature bridge everyone is concerned about.
ODOT spokesman Terry Angier says Oklahoma's highways and bridges are built to a national standard that calls for them to withstand a lot of vibration, whether it comes from cars and trucks or Mother Nature shaking the ground. Inspections turned up no structural damage to any bridges and just one problem involving a highway.
There was one roadway, not a bridge, a roadway on 62, Highway 62, east of Meeker, that buckled.
This patch marks the spot. Angier said it was just a weak spot in the road. If the earthquake hadn't caused the buckling, she says extreme heat or cold would have. Clay Pope heads up the Association of Conservation Districts, which checked out the dams.
After the inspection, there was no significant visual damage that could be seen from the earthquake, so we feel like they came through pretty good.